Welcome to Learning Through Math, the podcast. I'm Laura at I Teach the Why.
I'm Karina at Mrs. Cousins 5. Our mission is to inspire ourselves and others to keep learning and improving with passion.
And hugs. You can find us at learningthroughmath.com and on Twitter at Laura and Karina.
Come and join us on this journey of learning.
Thanks for joining us. We are recording this in August of 2020.
And welcome to episode 11. I do, we do, you do, let's don't. Most of the time.
We want to give a shout out to Karina on Twitter.
Yeah, another Karina, not me.
Not you. She's probably listened to all of our podcasts because she's made several comments. One was about number talks. Another one was, I love this, she called herself a case teacher. She copies and steals everything. I was like, yes, I'm going to steal that as a cute little saying.
Right, for sure. We should all strive to be case teachers. And then what I liked, too, is she tweaked the mistakes are expected and respected.
From your class.
Right. She uses in her class, mistakes are respected, inspected, and expected.
And she uses that for error correction.
I love that.
So thanks for tagging us and
joining the conversation.
You got it. Let's reflect back on our last episode. This is a funny story, listeners.
I know. So Laura has her whole classroom in her living room, which is where we're recording. And
dining room.
And dining room. Yeah, it's taken over the house. So I'm just looking around all her toys that she has in her.
They're tools.
Toys and tools. And my eye catches this tape that she has. It's like Scotch tape that has...
It looks like measuring tape.
It does. Right, yeah. It looks yellow. Like measuring tape, but it's sticky tape.
Right.
So I pick it up, and I look at it, and I'm like, oh, 1, 2, right? I'm like looking at the inches, right. And I'm like, oh, this is in inches. And I made a comment about, customary versus metric system. And again, because I'm Canadian, the customary system doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to us Americans either.
And especially after our episode, the power of 10 and using the 10 frame. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me. I'm like, oh my God, here's another use for the 10 frame. We could so easily use it for metric conversions.
And that's something we totally forgot to talk about.
Never thought of it.
Right?
Never thought of it.
But we do it when we teach it.
Right. At 1/10 of, right? Yeah.
And 10 times as many.
Yes. So I'm going to have to use that this year.
We forgot to mention that in the last episode, so...
Well, I had never thought of it that way. I really hadn't.
Wait, what?
Like, to use it with a 10 frame, I mean.
Oh, right. Me neither. Okay,
yeah.
I got you now. Right, because I forgot we were talking about 10 frames.
Yes.
I was thinking just the power of 10. Okay.
Right.
Well, you, my dear, have some good news to share.
I do. I forgot to share it last week. One of my projects this last year or so, year and a half, has been to become Google certified. I received my Google level 1 certification, my level 2 certification, and since December, I've been working on my trainer certification. And I got the email from Google. So I am a Google trainer certified educator.
Wow.
So exciting.
I am so proud of you.
Thank you. And I want to just shout out to our Google educator group in South Florida. Mm-hmm. If you don't follow them on Twitter or a Google educator group that's in your area, do so. They've got so many great ideas. People post and tag. We'll put it in the show notes and we'll tag it. But there's so many great groups out there that talk, Google tools and how to use it with the G Suite for education. It's so
I'm going to be bothering you a lot this year, right?
Please do. Please do. That's what I'm here for now.
So it's kind of like free consultation that you're going to be giving out. Okay, good to know. Well, it's kind of like what we do anyways.
That's right.
If somebody contacts us, whatever you need. Let's get into today's topic about I do, we do, you do. Let's don't most of the time. We've been talking about the gradual release of responsibility model for a few episodes now. And
yes.
How it's not it was never intended, I don't think, to be a model of instruction for math.
Right.
Definitely for literacy.
Right.
And in our research for this, I didn't know this. I knew about Fisher and Fry, but I didn't know before that. So in 1983, Pearson and Gallagher were the real ones that came up with this whole gradual release of responsibility model. We've had this model out there for 35 years, which kind of makes sense to me because even back as a student, that's how we were taught. But I think they just did the research and said, okay, here we go. And then Fisher and Fry, I think, took it to the marketing level, to the masses.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the model before we kind of, I don't want to say tear it apart, but we're going to really reflect on it and think about new ways of using it in a math classroom. And honestly, I think it can also be rethought of and revised in a literacy classroom too.
Yes.
Let's break it down. It starts off with the teacher providing the information.
The fountain of knowledge.
Right. And the teacher modeling, showing, thinking, all of those things, that the steps, really doing a think aloud of what are the steps for this procedure or for this strategy or for this skill.
Okay.
Then it moves into we do as a class and like
with
a group of student, right, the whole group and the teacher. So it's still the teacher modeling and kind of more coaching, but
still in the mix.
Still, right. Then it actually moves into another step.
A you do, but the you do has two steps. So you do is you do with a small group, and then the final you do is you do independently.
Yeah, so I think sometimes we mix the we do and the you do.
The first you do, yeah.
Yeah, to kind of together.
I think the reason that we keep saying, don't do this, or now we've changed it to, okay, most of the time, let's not do this in math, is because this was a literacy-based approach. And in math, we don't want regurgitators.
Yeah.
We don't want regurgitators in reading either.
That's
or
the
writing.
Thing. Right. That's why I'm saying I think we need to also revise it in reading and writing, honestly. Yeah, for sure.
Because we want thinkers. We want doers of math. We don't want regurgitators of processes. Now, I do think that the I do, we do, you do, which I was so against for a good chunk of years when Common Core came out, I think I have finally flipped my thinking into, okay, sometimes it's okay. If I'm teaching an algorithm, then that would be an okay time to do I do, we do, you do.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time, no. Because we want the kids to have that productive struggle.
Yes.
So we talked about flipping the I do, we do, you do.
Right.
Into you do,
we do, I do.
do.
Where the teacher is the I.
Yes.
I think it's also important to use variety in our classroom. We've talked about this before too, where we don't always want to do the same thing, do the same structure, do the same, because it gets boring, right? You've got to spice it up a little.
Yep.
So on some days, you want to just present a problem and say, go. Try it.
Because how are the kids going to remember anything? They have to do it themselves and make the connections themselves.
Right. It's that ownership of learning.
In our research for today's episode, I came across, which you've been following her for about a year now, from Mix and Math, Brittany Hagee, and she's got a great article on how let's not do I do, we do, you do all the time. I'm definitely going to put that. I think it's more like a blog post.
Right.
We'll put that in the show notes. And she also references Mike Flynn, who we've also talked about before. It's funny that, we have this network of math educators that we listen to and read about. And
they come up, they resurface like time and again, like Julie Dixon was resurfaced in this research that we did. Yeah, the Mix and Math website is a great resource, and Brittany puts out a lot of manipulatives using math, the concrete, representational, abstract. That's
our episode 3.
Yeah. She does talk a lot about that and how important it is to, when you're teaching, to use that. And we couldn't agree more. Let's discuss how a lesson would look like using like this flipped model of gradual release. So instead of I do, we do, you do, what does it look like to do a lesson? You do, we do, and I do.
Okay. I think the first thing is to use one great open-ended, rich task so that the kids have to think and struggle productively.
One tip I have for that is when you're choosing a task, as the teacher, try to answer it, like solve it, with the strategies that you expect the students to use. So what do they know currently? What's in their toolbox? A strategy that they would know from the previous grade that they could utilize in solving this problem. Because so many times we don't think about what do they know, right? Or how, like, we solve it the way we would solve it, and we don't solve it the way we expect, like, 5th graders to solve it.
This is a great thing to do during PLCs.
Yes.
That's something that this past year, there were 3 of us teaching 5th grade math. And I remember this one time we were talking about dividing fractions. And I said, okay, let's each solve it our own way. Definitely, I think 2 of us solved it very similarly, but the third person solved it completely differently. And not that it was wrong, but I said, explain to me how you thought this through, how you did this. It was so interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because that's not the way that I would have done it.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to the 5 practices, right? Of anticipating what kids are going to think and say and solve.
Yeah, and I just want to add too, that's how when I do my backwards planning and I look at the assessment first, I'll take the test using those strategies of the 5th graders that I know I'm going to teach them to make sure that they can use what I've taught in that assessment.
Or what they've learned.
Yeah.
Right? It is more of what they've learned. Because we don't really care how they solve it. Which again, go back to our state test. The whole idea of whatever standards you use is to let the kids figure it out in their own way. So state assessment makers, maybe if it's a division problem, just put it division and don't force a particular strategy on them. Thank you in advance.
Textbook writers.
And textbook writers.
Because that's the big problem I find, is that the textbook set will model one way, and then it says, but then it says another way, right? But expect the students to do that same method, strategy, tool, use whatever it is that they're showing in the, like, problem questions, right? Practice questions.
I don't remember if I said it on one of the previous episodes, but in our previous textbook series, I walked into a 4th grade math teacher trying to teach something where it was completely scaffolded and the teacher was having a hard time filling in all the blanks. And I looked at it and I literally took a marker, went over to her document camera, and I said, you know what? And I put a huge X through that entire page. I said, let's just try to figure out what the answer is to this problem.
Without it. Yeah, don't be afraid to put the textbook away in this whole process.
I mean, you could use the question.
Yes.
Right? And I think some textbook companies are getting wiser and are leaving a lot of blank space on that first page.
Right.
So that the kids can figure it out. But also, here's something. Don't put the statement at the bottom. If the question says, I don't know, how many apples are in the basket, textbook companies, don't put there were apples in the basket. Let the kids figure out what they're supposed to figure out.
That was the you do. Now, what would the we do look like?
Once we give kids time to productively struggle on their own, next is let's do a group discussion, a group think, whether it's at their table, up at the white books, wherever. I mean, personally to me, get them up, but that's just me. There
was a lot when I did that. I also chose to do it for my formal observation, by the way.
What?
Using the white book.
Oh.
And using this new model, this new idea of here's a question, you think about it, then go and talk about it together, and then we'll come back together at the end and I'll kind of guide you through it.
Didn't you get the highest rating?
Yeah. Yeah. But my principal definitely did like it very much.
What were you doing when the kids were up at the white books figuring out the problem?
I was just listening in on their conversations. I was going to every group and listening to what they were talking about. Some of them didn't want to, of course, when it's something new that they've done, they don't really know what to do. And it was funny to me that they didn't start with a model. They didn't try to draw what it looked like. They tried to go right to an algorithm.
Even though all year.
Yeah, that's really telling to me too, is what we've done as teachers, right? Was we go right into an algorithm as opposed to really work on their conceptual understanding.
Another thing I would do is not only listen into the conversations of kids, but if I felt like they were getting a little stuck, I would either ask them a question, or I'd say to them, go take a field trip over to so-and-so's group, over to that group, because I want them to be able to see what other groups are doing. That's the whole point,
right? To have that learning up so they can see it.
Exactly. Nothing needs to be hidden.
Yes.
It was probably around 1997. I went to my very first cooperative learning training. And I don't remember who the trainer was, but the whole idea was the Slavin cooperative learning method. I brought it back to my school. Another teacher had gone with me. We were actually asked to go over to another school during a PD and present to them. I remember one teacher asking, how do we grade this? And both of us looked at each other like, we don't know. We have no idea. A few years later, it finally dawned on me. I don't know why this took me so long. It's called cooperative learning. So we don't give them a grade. We don't assess them during the learning part, which is when they move into the I do. They're still practicing.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't have to give them a grade on classwork.
No.
I mean, we don't give grades anyways in our elementary school, but maybe middle and high school teachers, you could consider that classwork doesn't need to be graded. I was going to say necessarily.
Because it's a learning process.
It's a learning time.
Yeah.
And we've talked about summative and formative assessments before. Again, if you're giving an exit ticket, that's just a formative assessment. Do they get it or not? It doesn't have to be a grade. And please don't even get me started on grading homework. But you know what? The problem is, I know secondary teachers, at least where we are, they're supposed to give 18 grades per semester or I think it's per quarter, 18 grades. So that's 2 grades a week for 9 weeks. And again, grades that's
a whole other podcast.
How grades are stupid? Yes. How I can make it so you get an A or you get an F. Yes. Yeah. That's
That's another day.
Okay. Let me calm back down. Yeah. All right.
I think it's just about rethinking the way we teach, looking at what is working, what's our purpose, right? And with the gradual release, the purpose is really to model a procedure. Our purpose as teachers, or at least my purpose as a teacher, I know yours is too, is to have kids critically think.
Yes.
And if you're constantly giving them the information...
You mean spoon feeding?
Yeah. They're not going to be critical thinkers.
Ever.
Yeah. It's just that simple.
It is.
The challenge for this week
is to take a lesson that you have consistently done, and I do, we do, you do, that has nothing to do with a procedure or algorithm, flip it over its head and figure out a good question to ask them and let them go. You know what we didn't talk about? How are we going to do this in our distance learning time?
Long pause.
We talked, I think the last episode or the episode before when we were, freaking out about distance learning, about how less is more.
Less is more.
We cannot have kids sitting in front of a computer watching you do something for 8 straight hours, or 6 hours or whatever. It's just...
I really think it's going to come down to picking great questions.
And one
great question.
Where they get so much out of it.
Yeah. And that's hard to do. That's not easy. We need to rely on our teammates. We need to plan accordingly.
Yes.
Together, collaborate.
Just remember, nobody wins this year.
Yeah.
So everyone's just going to do the best that they absolutely can.
And less is more.
And less is more. Thanks for joining us, listeners. We'd love for you to subscribe to our podcast and give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting platform. We invite you to join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag #LearningThroughMath.
We'd love to hear your feedback. Make sure to tag us at Laura and Karina. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
To you too.